So today we will talk about the Assisted Reproductive Technology Bill 2021, and this bill has been passed by the Lok Sabha and will pass by the Rajya Sabha, and then President will sign. Then this will be Assisted Reproductive Technology Act 2021. So this is very important. What is the main aim of this assisted reproductive technology? If you talk about, basically to regulate the assisted reproductive technology which is going on in the private clinics or private as well. So that might be ethical and that might not be ethical. So basically try to regulate that thing in a legal manner. This is the one of the objective of this bill. So let's talk about. As I have told you that on December 1st, 2021, it means yesterday, the Lok Sabha passes the bill after deep scrutiny by the Standing Committee of Parliament. So this has been placed in the Lok Sabha in last year September, but after the deep scrutiny by the Standing Committee of Parliament, this has been passed yesterday. So this is very important. If we talk about what is assisted reproductive technology, so in this bill there has been defined, but one of the main objective of the assisted reproductive technology basically to treat the infertility. Sometimes what happened that sometimes a male member has not given this such kind of a sperm or that not produced that sperm, or sometimes women are infertile. So in that case there is no fertility and no newborn child took place. In that case, to treat that fertility there are the two options. Either we have to adopt a child, that is one option, to become a mother or to become a father of that child, or there are this some assisted reproductive technology, or you can be the surrogate mother if you talk about, and there are this some kind of in vitro fertilization, like they take sperm and then they take egg from the female member and then they fertilize and put in the embryo of a woman. So that is known as the in vitro fertilization. That is the very important assisted reproductive technology which is we are going to talk about. So this is very important, and that is the way you can become and a couple can become a mother and father. So that is what we known as the assisted reproductive technology. So according to that this bill, if you talk about what is assisted reproductive technology, then remember that it includes the all techniques. Remember that all techniques that seeks to obtain the pregnancy by handling the sperm or immature egg cell outside the human body. As I have told you that they take sperm from the male member and they take egg from the female member. Then they fertile in the lab and clinics through the technology. So that is the science is very advanced. So then they fertilize outside the human body, and then when they fertilize the egg and the sperm, they put into the female member embryo, and that lead to the pregnancy of that woman and then a child born. So this is very important. You need to remember this point. So that is the outside the human body. Remember that this point is very important, outside the human body, and transferring the gamete in the embryo into the reproductive system of a woman. So that is known as the assisted reproductive technology according to this bill, and that is also known as the in vitro fertilization. In vitro fertilization is one of the important, and another is the surrogate mother. That is very important if you talk about. So remember that example of ART services if you talk about, then the gamete donation. Remember that gamete donation, in vitro fertilization. As I have told you that what is the in vitro fertilization. If you talk about the gestational surrogacy, as I have told you that what happened that a couple actually hire a woman, and that women actually take the sperm of a male member, not physically. Remember that, not physically, but through the science or through the technology, they take sperm and then put into the body of the that fertilized part or area of that woman, and then they take, that is the 9 months of pregnancy, actually they are known as the gestational period, and that gestational period into their body and then lead to the pregnancy, and when the born child, and that actually the surrogate mother give that child to the commissioning couple. So this is very important, and that is known as this gestational surrogacy. So there is one of very important bill, the surrogacy regulation bill and the medical termination bill. Actually that two bill is also supplementary of this assisted reproductive bill, which ensures the right of a woman and also the rights of a couple, and whatever is lead to the sometimes death and everything which lead to the actually try to regulate. And this is one of the criteria which through this is one of the objective of the bill, actually to control the unethical practices which is going on in the country. So this is very important if you talk about. Then remember that these services can be provided through the art clinics, assisted reproductive technology clinics, as I have told you that, and assisted reproductive technology bank. Clinics means where they fertilize. What do you mean by the banks? Actually, they store the gamete or egg. So this is very important, and then fertilize and then give to the commissioning couple. So that is known as. So here I have basically the data store. So remember that if you talk about, and as I have told you that one of the main objective of the assisted reproductive technology is to treat the infertility, as I have told you. Actually, why infertility took place? So if you talk in the today's lifestyle, actually women and men both married at 30 years, sometimes 32 and sometimes 35. So by the time what happens, sometimes it leads to the infertility, and that's why infertility causes actually a sense of mind, but women and male member both become a father and mother, but because of the infertility they are not able to biologically or physically, they cannot actually able to become a mother and father. So these techniques can be used and can become a mother and father. So this is very important. So let's talk about the other features of this bill. If you talk about the features of the bill, then first it's talk about, as I have told you, that what is this assisted reproductive technology, and then the regulation of assisted reproductive technology clinics and the banks actually where the data store related to the gametes. So remember that if you talk about, so remember that every art clinics and banks must be registered under the National Registry of Banks. So if there is any art clinics and banks which must be registered to the National Registry of Banks and clinics of the Indian National Registry, and this Indian National Registry will be established and that will work as a central database. So remember that. If you talk about the another, then state government will appoint authorities for facilitating the registration process of art clinics and art banks. So remember that. If you talk about the clinics and banks will be registered only if they meet the certain standards like physical infrastructure, technical manpower and diagnostic facility. Means if there is any art clinic or art banks, that will be registered only if there is a sufficient amount of infrastructure in all the parameters met. That art clinics and banks will be registered with the government National Registry Bank. So remember that. If you talk about the registration will be for the 5 years and subject to further renewal. Means the first registration will be applicable for 5 years and then further renewable. But remember that if it lead to any violation of this act, that license can be cancelled. Remember that. If you talk about another, that conditions for the gamete donation and supply. Remember that what is gamete? Gamete is basically the reproductive part of the human. What is the male reproductive part? Is basically the sperm, and if you talk about in case of female, then that is egg. So that is known as the gamete. Gamete basically means the reproductive cell. So remember that. What it includes that screening of gamete, donors, collection and storage of semen. Actually semen is that fluid of man, that is sperm. So remember that. And provision of a toy donor can only be done by a registered art bank. So whatever is the registered art clinics and art bank, so donor, whatever he will be the donor, that donor will be only with the registered art clinics and art banks. In case of violation, that it might lead to a case on that person. Further, if you talk about, then semen can obtain between the 21 to 55 years in case of male. Remember that. And in case of female, that age is 23 to 35 years. Remember this point. An oocyte donor, basically the female, should be an ever married woman having at least one alive child of her own minimum of 3 years. Means if there is any oocyte provided by a woman, then should we are married women and minimum having bearing a child of 3 years, and that child must be alive is the case. So this is one of the discrimination, and it basically excluded the male partner and a single male partner and especially the LGBT community. So this is one of the discriminatory part, and can donate only one time. That semen can be only donated by one time. So this is very important if you talk about. A bank cannot supply the gamete of a single donor to more than one commissioning couple. So this is very important. Means whatever gamete is taking place, then should be given to only one commissioning couple which is seeking the art. So this is very important. If you talk about the condition for offering the art services, then remember that can only by a written informed consent of both the parties, means the donor and those who are seeking the assisted reproductive technology. So there should be a written consent of both the parties if you talk about. Then remember that need to provide the insurance coverage to a women. So remember that in case of any contingency, so you have to meet the insurance coverage. In case of death or in case of any damage or loss to a woman, then you have to provide the insurance coverage to that woman. So this is very, very important if you talk about. Then remember that checking for genetic disease before the embryo implantation. Suppose what happened in any time when the sperm and eggs fertilized in the lab, and sometimes the sperm might carry the disease and sometimes egg might carry the disease. So you need to firstly check the genetic disease of both the parties, those actually who are taking the giving the sperm and those who are giving the egg. So this is very, very important, which is a very positive point you need to remember. If you talk about no predetermined selection of sex, so remember that means we will provide a boy, we will provide a girl. So this kind of predetermined sex selection will not take place. This is completely prohibited, just like others. So remember that. If we talk about the right of child through art, means those child who are born through the assisted reproductive technology, the right of child is what? Then remember that a donor will not have any right over a child, means donor have to hold a child but donor has not any right. The right belongs to the commissioning couple and that child has every right just like natural rights of others child. So further provision if you talk about, then remember that national and state boards, this is very important board basically related to the assisted reproductive technology. So it is basically for the regulation of art services. Remember that. What is the main function? Advise the central government on art related policy matters, reviewing and monitoring the implementation of the bill which is provided under the assisted reproductive technology bill if you talk about. Then remember that for formulating the code of conduct, basically maintain the ethical provisions. So this is very, very important. And what is the main job of the state board? Basically to advise the national board in the policy matter or basically to help the national board. So this is very, very important. If you talk about, there are the offenses and after that there will be penalties. So what are the offenses? Basically, if there is any child born through the art and that child is abandoned or exploited, then will be considered as offense. And this is very, very important. So when a donor or a woman also exploit the commissioning couple or commissioning couple exploit the donor or a woman, that will be considered as offenses if you talk about. Then remember that using the intermediaries to obtain donor, you need not to find any intermediary. You have to go to the national registry board and there will be you get the donors whatever egg you needed and if you needed the sperm. So this is very, very important. Rather than finding the intermediaries which will be considered an offense, you have to go directly to the art clinics. They will be provide you. So this is very, very important. If you talk about the selling, purchasing and trading and importing the human embryo will be considered as offense. If you talk about the transferring the human embryo into a male or an female which is a unnatural, so this is will be also considered a offenses. But remember that the first violation of all these provision will not attract the jail provision but only a fine of 10 lakh to 20 lakh. But after the further violation will take place, then 8 to 12 years of jail including the fine. So this is very, very important provision. So this is all about the assisted reproductive technology. If you talk about the main flaws in this bill, actually this included those couple which are live-in relationship. Another is basically the single man, and most important is the LGBT community has been excluded, which is completely unknown why LGBT communities has been excluded. Actually they needed actually. So that's why this is one of the main flaws of this bill. So what are the summary of this video? You need to remember basically what is the aim, basically to regulate the market which is going on in the market, basically the regulation. There will be a national board and a state board. There will be a national registry which will act as a central database. You need to remember this is basically. So thank you guys. Hope you will like this video.